Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. And this is a missing person segment. I want you to know that doing this kind of work takes a toll on you physically and mentally. And I'm one of those kind of people that I tend to feel the emotions, maybe more than some. And it does drag me down at times. Now today, the first case we're going to talk about is an update. And when you first hear about a disappearance, there's a lot of things within the scope of looking at it that can happen. Right? Could be a voluntary disappearance, could be an abduction, could be an accident. They took a hike and fell, and it could be something else. As you get down in age, as you go from teenager to older child to toddler to baby, as you go further down, those choices become less. And here's what I mean. This case we're going to talk about first is the disappearance of Emile Soleil from France, 2 years old, went missing July 8th, 2023. I did a video about it. A lot of things have changed since I did that first video. And I know a lot of you push incessantly for me to cover a case before all the facts come out. And I don't like to do that because more times than not, when I say something, I'll be wrong. And there's not a lot of facts at that front end to really address and understand what happened. Now in Emile's case, 2 years old, there aren't a lot of options. And as we go through this, I'm going to explain it to you. So he disappeared in a little village called La Vernay. His parents and he lived in Marseille. And the day he disappeared, his parents had dropped him off at his grandparents' house. It was actually the wife's mother's house and her husband. They dropped him off and they left soon after that. And then not long after that, the grandfather took Emile into the backyard to do some chopping of wood. Now, at this time in France, it was exceptionally hot. They were going through a heat wave. And the grandfather wasn't out there long, and he lost track of the boy. I've told you before that disappearances happen a lot at grandparents' homes, aunts and uncles' homes, when the father isn't around. Father's not around in this case. Well, the grandfather lost track of him, and at about the time he lost track of him, neighbors saw Emile walking down the middle of, it's essentially a very small 1.5 car width road that goes through the middle of town. Let me show you. Here's what the road looks like. Very narrow, small. A lot of the area is wooded, but a lot of the area isn't. And I'm going to show you an aerial picture in a second. This is the picture I showed you when I originally covered the case. Broke my heart. That's the cutest little guy you can ever imagine. And the neighbors seeing him, that didn't come up right away. So July 8th, he disappears at 5:15 p.m. Police are notified. Big searches started immediately. But really, on July 9th through July 14th, there is a nonstop, massive search in this little tiny community in France. The elevation of that is about 4,000 feet. The police brought in canines, helicopters, heat-seeking helicopters. And in fact, they searched every building in that village. 25 people live there, that's it. Everyone was questioned. Now that's important. Because now what you're going to find out applies to how well they did their job then. Somebody disappears, you go to every house. You ask the owner who lives there, who was there at this time when he disappeared, where was the person when Emile disappeared? Oh, they were in Marseille, or they were somewhere else. Okay, where? Do they have a car? Important. But they searched every building and they talked to all the neighbors, and hopefully they did exactly what I just told you. Well, on July 14th, they had nothing. They had hundreds of searchers, hundreds of search and rescue people combing this little tiny village. They were probably stumbling over themselves looking for Emile. Now I can tell you, a toddler under 3 years old should be found 95% of the time in 2 miles or less. And they went far outside of that towards the end looking for anything, and they found nothing. Now, here's a little background on the area I thought was strange. La Vernay is called the Village of the Damned. In March 2015, a German Wings Airbus 320 crashed in the village, killing everyone on board, 150 people and 2 babies, and it was brought down by the co-pilot purposely. In 2008, they had one cafe in town, and the manager of that cafe was brutally murdered. Yeah, Village of the Damned. Only 25 people live there. Now, this year, so Emile disappeared July 8th. So about 8 months later, just a few days ago, March 28th, police had organized that all the witnesses surrounding this disappearance, grandma, grandpa, people that saw Emile walking down the road, everybody in town was going to be in their location that they were in when Emile disappeared. This was a good idea. Now, when you do this, it's only been 8 months, so memory shouldn't be real bad. They wanted to see if the witnesses saw Emile walking down the road. That same road I showed you. And then they quickly lost sight of him. Where could he have gone? Right. So they did that, and it went all day. It was March 28th. Now, friends, we've talked about coincidence many times in the past. Do you believe in coincidences? Is everything that we'd say is a coincidence in reality a response to something that's already happened? 48 hours after they do the recreation in the city, a hiker is walking down a dirt trail, 1 kilometer, not 1 mile, 1 kilometer from the grandparents' house. And as they're walking down the trail, they look down and they see a little skull and some bones. They call the police. Well, there's only one little boy missing in that village. Police know what they know. They get the skull, they get the bones, and they immediately turn it over to forensics. March 31st, the very next day, police confirm the bones were of Emile. Now, they stop everything. They throw every resource they've got. And what they're looking for is the remaining part of the skeleton. It appears that they had the front part of the skeleton, not the lower jaw. They had some teeth from the upper, and they had some other bones. The day after they found the bones and forensics did their work, the mayor in the town made a statement. He stated that this is his words, not mine, there is no way Emile went into that area where they found a skeleton. Apparently it was a kind of a steep area. And he also stated that that area where they found it had been searched many times. And here's the real kicker. In the previous months, between the time Emile disappeared and they found his remains, they had brought loggers into that area to clear out some shrubs and brushes and small trees. They had found nothing. Now, I read probably 20, 30 different articles about what the police were thinking right now. And here's what they're thinking. They think that the bones were placed there by an animal, animals, or by a human. So, let's pretend that those bones were in that area during the last 8 months. Then the numerous times that police brought cadaver dogs into that area after he disappeared would have hit on those remains because they're within 2 to 3 miles. They would have hit on it. There's just no doubt in my mind. I thought about this for the last couple days. Let me show you kind of a chart of what and how this happened. So this is the grandparents' home in the village. There's one road that goes all the way through the village. One. Emile's seen going down that road in the village. And he's found between a chapel and this building right here. And he's found right here. Between the church and the chapel. Being between the church and the chapel, is that another coincidence? I don't know. Because he was seen on the road, my gut tells me there's a decent chance that somebody was coming around a corner of that road fast and they hit him and killed him. People got scared, put him in their car and drove him away. Recent publicity about the disappearance, 2 days before his bones were found, maybe the plea of the mom and the family played on this person's conscience, and they put the bones in an area that they knew they'd be found. That's hunch number one. Now, when the police were initially doing their searches and they were going through homes, I would hope that they were also looking at the front end of every car in that area. Because when you're dealing with kids, you're always thinking of the possibility that an auto accident is involved. Because a lot of times it is. And the front end of a car, if you're there fast enough, people don't even have time to clean it. And a lot of times the people don't know what you're looking for. They could be so subliminal. A little hair, a little fleck of a tissue. People have no idea what police are looking for. I do hope that the parents and the grandparents have some relief now knowing that Emile is in their hands, where his remains are. I also read about his grandfather, how he's just stricken with horrific guilt. I would be. Said that the grandfather was an osteopath, smart man, and that people had initially pointed fingers at him until people said they saw Emile walking down the road. People can be really cruel. Some of the comments I read on our site here after I put something up, some of those comments are cruel. Some of the things people say, there's not an ounce of evidence to support it, but they say some mean things about people. I'm sorry. I don't know. And then there's always the chance that this is just a straight up missing 411 case and he was returned. I don't know. There's the majority portion of the body hasn't been found. But with the cranium, upper jaw being found, it's almost like somebody maybe knew forensics, because that is really the piece of the body where you could get DNA almost every time. So Emile, rest in peace, my son. Next case, quite a bit different. Again, somebody's son. Individual's name, never talked about it before, out of Canada. The boy's name was Gilles Gray, 16 years old. Went missing June 26, 1949. It was a Sunday. In you spell it VAID/OR in Quebec. Family lived there. He told his mom that he wanted to go fishing in Lake Bluin, and that residence was nearby. He loved to fish, he loved the outdoors, extremely familiar with the area. Kind of like you'd be familiar with your neighborhood as well. Told his mom he'd be back late that night. He left. He didn't return. Parents went to sleep thinking, he can take care of himself. The next morning he didn't show up, and that's when they called the police. Here's the town that he lived in, and he went to fish this lake right here. Lots of water in this area. Lots and lots. Again, he lived just very close to the lake, took a walk. Gonna go down to the banks and fish. Exactly something I would have done when I was 16. For sure. And why would I have done that? And I can only relate it to how I would think. If I have a lot on my mind, fishing's the perfect thing. You're alone, kind of get with your thoughts. It's quiet, serene. I can relate to that. Well, we know there's press disinformation now all the time. It's so bad now you don't even know what to believe, right? Well, there was press disinformation in 1949 as well. Somehow or another, the press got a hold of the fact that Gillis hadn't done well in school. And he had failed on the Friday before he disappeared. And the press stated he was suicidal, and he probably went out with those thoughts in mind. First of all, for the press to imply he was depressed or whatever, and you aren't 100% right, you better knock that crap off. What was the truth? His mom clarified it later. Gillis wasn't a great student, but he was a good kid. He knew he wasn't doing well, and he knew he was going to fail. So he talked to his family and he said, hey, I'm going to try to get a job at the biggest mine in the area. And he went down and took the interview. And he got a job there, which was a pretty prestigious job at the time. And it paid good money. And he was starting the day after he disappeared, June 27th. So not only was the first press information wrong, it was grossly wrong. So on June 27th, the RCMP that arrived and took the report from the mom and the dad said, hey, could you show us the trail he would have taken? And they did. And they walked the trail down to the lake, looked around, couldn't find anything. They came back, went to their offices, and made a request for more assistance the following day. And they got it. June 28th, 30 of the most experienced woodsmen within 100 miles responded and participated in the search. RCMP had 2 seaplanes that were flying the area, and they had a car equipped with a loudspeaker that was calling out messages to searchers and to Gillis. Well, they searched for 2 days, 14-hour days, and then at the end of that day, they had found nothing. June 29th, early in the day, the local RCMP officers requested more assistance from Ottawa and Toronto. And surprisingly, within hours, they got a response that Ottawa was sending a canine. And they decided on that night, June 29th, that they were going to search through the night with lanterns. And they were going to build some bonfires, which is a good idea. Here's why that's good. If somebody's missing, and you're in the dark, dark woods, and you look up on a mountainside and there's a huge fire there, that's obviously being maintained and groomed by somebody, you go there. And that was the idea. Sometimes it worked. Not this time. June 30th. Ottawa now made a public plea, and it paid off. 200 searchers arrived, and then the RCMP split them into 2 groups of 60 to 70 per group. And those 3 groups, they divisioned them off and they had them search different quadrants. Well, one of the searchers came up with a coat. They weren't sure. It hadn't been there that long. So they take it and they give it to the mom. And Mrs. Gray said, that's Gillis's coat? Well, that changed everything. Now you have a location that he had definitely been in. They put out a call and they asked Toronto again, send us more assistance. Specifically, dogs, people, everything you can. Toronto came through. July 1st and 2nd, 2 police dogs of the best from Toronto arrived. The heat on this search was intense. Many people said it was horrific to be out there in the humidity and the heat. Well, it was so bad that one of the canines within the first 5 hours fell ill and had to be carried back to search and rescue headquarters and nurse bath to health. The other dog was in a different quadrant with searchers. I read this, I've never heard of this. And a dog was attacked by black flies and mosquitoes so bad that they had to completely pull out of the search. Now that's pretty bad. I've heard of weather-related incidents that inhibit a search, but insect-related attacks like this, I've never heard of it. But that definitely would encumber a search. Now Gillis had 3 brothers. The brothers and the dad searched constantly. They'd come home, get a meal, go out. Get home, get a meal, go out. They were searching 14 to 16-hour days. And at about that July 2nd timeline, Gillis's mom had a nervous breakdown. She had to be taken by ambulance to the hospital and hospitalized. Gillis's dad and the boys continued searching. At this time, late on July 2nd, they decided to keep 60 bushmen in the area after the sun. They covered them all up with fly nets and things, and they put them out there in the middle of the bush calling Gillis's name. They weren't getting a response. And they decided to hone in and confine themselves to the area around that coat. They had already covered it multiple days. They had found nothing, but they thought that was their only chance. Now, the other odd part about this is Gillis had a fishing pole and some fishing supplies he carried in a creel. None of that was ever found. July 3rd was the last day of the search. Super high heat, high humidity. What that equals is rapid body decomposition. A canine should be able to pick that up if the body is decomposing 2 to 3 miles. Now, if you look back on this search, you have canines that couldn't pick up a scent. At least 3 different canines, besides the 2 that were attacked. There was one here earlier. They were searching all around water. He's a fisherman. He's alone. And he disappears and no tracks are found. I think that's odd. Really odd. And I searched forward 15 years. He was never found. So where could he go? Now some people would say, well, Dave, maybe he fell in the water and drowned. Yeah, that's possible. But this was June 26th. And if the body had gone in the lake, it would have gone down to the bottom. That lake would have kept heating up through the summer. His body would have filled with bubbles and it would have come to the surface and he would have been found. But wait a minute, Dave, he never was. Exactly. So what happened to Gilles Gray? I wish I knew. Never found. His family was devastated and his mom eventually got out of the hospital several days after the search and recovered. And I suppose it was much better on Mrs. Gray to have the rest of her family around her as she healed. The thing I always think about on these searches, being in the house, the last house that your son was in, and then you're looking at that lake every day knowing that your son disappeared somehow around that lake. I don't know if I could do it. I know people do, but I don't know if I could. So friends, Missing 411 Washington. If you haven't read it, get it. Go to my website and read the reviews from people like you that have made the reviews on the videos I make on the comments section. You go to our website, NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store. The other thing I ask of you is read the comments. I would say 80% of you don't read the comments on the videos and just put a comment that's been replicated 10, 15 times. Read them. You will learn a lot by these. You guys are smart. And you make great comments. And I encourage everybody to read them. I do. People don't believe, I know you're not going to read this, but I read that. People make that comment all the time. I think it's kind of hilarious. Yeah, I do. But I greatly appreciate you, every one of you. You're nice people. You're very kind to one another. And lately I've been taking your recommendation. I've dumped probably 20 comments in the last 5 days from people that are just abusive. I got rid of them. But thanks for being here. And please share this on your social media. It'll help. And check and make sure you're subscribed. Remember, There's thousands of you that think you're subscribed and you're not. Just so you know. I can guarantee it. So, be kind. It's a kindness revolution. It costs us nothing. It reaps huge dividends. Paulides out.